The government today has tabled an amendment bill to the Aadhaar Act that could perhaps make a loophole and allow private companies to access Aadhaar data again.
On the debate tonight, amid uproar, Centre introduces the Aadhaar Amendment Bill in Lok Sabha.
This proposed amendment in the shape of the bill is being done in compliance of the Supreme Court judgment itself. Whatever gaps the Supreme Court has found, we are addressing those gaps in the shape of this amendment.
Rather, it is a method of authentication.
The opposition has called the bill premature and says it has been introduced without due public consultation.
The fact is, the court made it very clear that the mandatory Aadhaar-based authentication by private service producers is unconstitutional and a violation of the right to privacy. Therefore, this bill is in violation of the Supreme Court judgment, the fundamental right to privacy.
The amendment to the Section 4 of the bill proposes giving UIDAI the authority to decide if private entities like telecom giants and banks will have the authority to demand and use Aadhaar data. The amendment raises concern that if UIDAI gives them permission, would it circumvent the Supreme Court judgment? Mirror now asks, is the centre trying to make Aadhaar mandatory for mobile and banking again? Was the Aadhaar Amendment Bill introduced in haste? Let's debate.
So is there a problem? That's the question we are asking. Pawan Dugal is a cyber law expert, Nikhil Pava, editor of media, Nama Suleiman, Mohammad Khan for the Congress, Rahul Singh, policy analyst, Anupam Saraf, former IT advisor to the Goa Chief Minister and one of the petitioners in the Aadhaar case. I thank you all for joining us. Nikhil Pava, I will start with you. Nikhil, first of all, Happy New Year and congratulations. We understand you recently got married. I want to start off, you were one of the crusaders for data protection, one of the crusaders for Aadhaar and the privacy. Do you believe, have you read through this amendment in the bill, do you believe that it might actually create a loophole?
You know, Faye, I think it's a very confused amendment because it tends to mix authentication with identification. The Supreme Court has disallowed authentication. What this bill is, it is trying to allow identification without authentication. So the question is, how do you identify someone without authenticating that they are who they say they are? In the second instance, I think one of the odd aspects is that, you know, Aadhaar was never meant to be a proof of identification or identity. It was only meant to authenticate. You see, if you've got an Aadhaar number, you would know that there was no verification of your documents that takes place. They just accept whatever documents you're giving to them, which is what's happened in one of the cases where a journalist took a fake driver's license and got a legitimate Aadhaar number made. So if it's not a proof of identity, why is the act being amended to make it a proof of identity? So over a billion people have been enrolled into this particular database. It's not a proof of their identity at all. The other one is that, you know, there has been no consultation regarding these changes or these amendments. And so it's not following a process which is democratic in nature, where people like you and me can participate and give suggestions to the government. So it's on the whole, it's not well thought out. It just seems to be being done in a hurry without proper notice and without proper consultation. It looks like the government is trying to push some of these things through before the elections.
Anupam Saraf, do you agree?
I completely agree that this is something done without public consultation. It basically ignores the fact that representatives of people, when they frame bills, are meant to represent the views of the people. And I think the views of the people and the will of the people as regards Aadhaar is very clear. People are absolutely fed up with Aadhaar. They have been suffering for the last 10 years since Aadhaar was born. So, and I think the Supreme Court also has made it clear that Aadhaar has to be watered down. And in fact, Justice Chandrachud went so far as to say that Aadhaar is a fraud on the Constitution of India. So when we have such strong strictures by the court, it is extremely strange that the government is in a hurry to actually, negate whatever strictures the Supreme Court has passed, whatever watering down of the Aadhaar bill that it has done, and it is trying to push this through in a rapid way. I think the second thing that is important to notice is that Aadhaar is one number which is connected with biometric and demographic data, neither of which is certified by the UIDAI. So instead of correcting the lacuna that this data is uncertified, they are in a hurry to try and mandate this for use by a whole range of people across the country. So I find this really strange, because a government which is interested in good governance would have said that the first thing we need to correct is that we need to get the UIDAI to certify each biometric and each demographic data which is connected with the number, so that we actually know that this signifies that it's the data of the person who it purports to be, which today it is not. Secondly, I think it's important to notice that when this database has been created for 118 crore people, as per the affidavit of the UIDAI to the Supreme Court, they have at no time actually audited or verified that the 118 crore people are genuine people. Interestingly, to get an Aadhaar, you need to have at least two other primary IDs. And according to the UIDAI, the other most prevalent primary ID is the voter's ID. And according to the same affidavit, the UIDAI says there are 60 crore voter IDs which exist in the country. Then there are 29 crore PAN cards which exist. There are 17.37 crore driver's licenses which exist. And there are 15 crore ration cards which exist, and 6.9 crore passports. So if you take any combination of these two IDs, the maximum number of Aadhaars that can be issued is 60 crores. So if you look at the balance 58 crores which the UIDAI claims, they have been issued without any of these primary IDs. So therefore, It is a huge amount of duplicates, ghosts, or suspect Aadhaar numbers which exists. Since Aadhaar is being used to transfer subsidies, benefits, and services to citizens, it is extremely important to know who are the Aadhaar numbers who are receiving subsidy, benefits, and services. If 58 crore Aadhaar numbers are suspect in terms of their genuineness, then it's extremely important for the CAG and the CVC to come in and ask questions as to where is this subsidy, benefit, and service going. So I think this is a huge issue. I think we are missing the whole point that this act has been made to transfer and target subsidy, benefits, and services. Who is it going to? Who is certifying? The UIDAI has no role in the Aadhaar Act to actually certify that the subsidy reached a beneficiary.
Well, let me bring in Bhaskar Ghosh. Yes, Mr. Saraf, let me bring in Bhaskar Ghosh, who's a spokesperson of the BJP, joining us right now. Mr. Ghosh, good evening. Thank you for joining us. If you've just heard the arguments, and this is fundamentally what the arguments are. Shashi Tharoor was with us on the channel a little while ago. The concern is that the amendment bill to Aadhaar is circumventing what the Supreme Court told us. The amendment will allow private companies to start using Aadhaar to verify and to identify customers. The amendment will allow private entities to hold Aadhaar data, which is clearly in circumvention of what the Supreme Court told us. The privacy and the security of that data is now a concern, and it did not consult any, or the government did not consult any stakeholder before drawing up this amendment. Is the government hoping to allow private entities like telecom companies access to Aadhaar data through this bill?
See, actually, if you see, there's the today's bill, which has been tabled up in the Parliament, Lok Sabha. It is actually in detail of that bill, which has been amended, and particularly the Section 7 has been retained as unaltered. And the idea behind it is that the Aadhaar card should be the basis of a unique identifications number, and where the private agencies, so-called private agencies, they can also verify the identity of a citizen through this Aadhaar card. Now, the question is that how the data under the Aadhaar card will be kept as an very with due secrecy and with due honor.
One second. Mr.
The
Ghosh,
question is that
the Supreme Court
datas,
told us very clearly that private companies are not to use Aadhaar at all. There are several other ways of identifying customers. Private companies are not to use Aadhaar at all. So no telecom company, no private bank was allowed, as per the Supreme Court, to use Aadhaar to verify anybody. So the question of how they use the data should not even arise. Now, my question to you is, why is the government introducing a bill that circumvents that decision of the Supreme Court?
No, the Supreme Court has given decision of, obviously we have to honor the decisions. But if you, in practicality, what government wants, that there should be one unique identification numbers for each and every citizen in order to verify the legalities, the legal aspect of the citizen, the legalities of the citizenship, because there is a lot of fake, a lot of immigrants are over here.
Mr. Ghosh, the Aadhaar is not a proof of citizenship.
Documentation have been issued.
And the government themselves have verified that immigrants have received Aadhaar. It's not a proof of citizenship. Your passport is a proof of citizenship. Your PAN card is a proof of your tax, your tax details. Aadhaar is not a proof of citizenship.
It is not a proof of, it is not, I agree. Aadhaar is not a proof of citizenship, but Aadhaar is an identification of a citizen of this, one of the identification
the
citizens
Aadhaar
of the country.
is a verification of your identity.
Which is also valid.
No, one second. All right, let me bring in Pavan Duggal. No, one second. Mr. Pavan Duggal is a cyber law expert. He's a lawyer. He also understands cyber law very keenly. Mr. Duggal, if you've had the time to read through the amendment, and I'm sure you have, on page number 3, line number 25, in that section 5, clause 7 says, notwithstanding anything contained in the foregoing provisions, mandatory authentication of an Aadhaar number holder on the provision of any service shall take place if the authentication requirement is made by a law to Parliament. Effectively, it means tomorrow, Parliament could pass a law saying you cannot hold a SIM card unless you submit your Aadhaar. Is that what that means?
Well, Faye, I can't hear you very clearly, but the question is, can I connect you again, because it's very, very faint.
Okay, all right. We'll connect to you again. Let me bring in the rest of my panel. Rahul Singh, policy analyst. Rahul Singh, do you believe that this act may be in violation of the Supreme Court judgment?
It's a contempt of the Supreme Court judgment.
I guess no. I think government cannot go against the Supreme Court. So it's not about the violation of Supreme Court. It's about if Supreme Court has certain directives to the government, government wants to still implement, government has to follow what Supreme Court, of course, is directing to. One of the reasons why government is probably sure of to go for it is they want to ensure that the use of Aadhaar goes more legal way. We remember, you remember the case of SEBI. When SEBI was there only as an observer, of course, there were no teeth to SEBI, and so they could not punish the companies which were defaulting or going against law. So the same might happen to UIDAI, the organization which is going to take care of the Aadhaar process. If they are given more power, probably they are going to create provisions to punish the organizations which are misusing the data of Aadhaar. So, as you said, identity and authentication, there's two separate things, and they will be probably followed. Government has to follow these rules because Supreme Court has given the directives on it. But giving more legal power to the organization is going to probably secure the data. Okay. Just a quick parallel. When telecom companies came in and we gave our data to telecom companies, I think government did not have enough legal provisions and telecom companies sold our data. What did government do then? we'll have to protect data. And so, like Shashi Tharoor was saying, protection law is important, but not that we leave everything else from the provisions of protection inbuilt within the law.
Nikhil Pava, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think we need a data protection law before any amendments to the Aadhaar Act are made. In fact, the data protection law needed to come in before the Aadhaar Act itself came into place. I'm not sure of what the gentleman's saying here, but giving the UIDAI more powers is not necessarily a good idea. We need a data protection authority that can look into these issues and deal with them as an entity that specializes in privacy and in protecting user interests. What we have seen with the UIDAI over the last few years is that user interests and citizen interests are not its top priority. Protecting Aadhaar and the government, including entities which have been in contempt of court and violating Supreme Court orders, is what the UIDAI has typically done. Their interest is in more towards enrolling more and more people into the Aadhaar database, not necessarily in protecting data. They've failed repeatedly. Their systems have been compromised, their data has been accessed. We've seen numerous instances of this. I wouldn't want to give the UIDAI more powers and make it into a large constitutional authority that is trying to look into privacy. We need a separate entity there.
Well, Pavan Dugal is back with us. Mr. Dugal, do you believe that this amendment is in contempt of court?
I think this amendment is nothing but an attempt to bypass the orders and the mandate of the Supreme Court. Once the Supreme Court has crystal clearly laid down the law of the land, and when you actually see that in the context of the privacy judgment, I think this entire exercise is to tell to the Supreme Court that yes, we would still allow access of private entities to Aadhaar without any one of us as a country having a national law either on data protection or on privacy or on cyber security. Now, the entire ecosystem that has developed around the Aadhaar, thanks to the government joining it, is now sought to be perpetuated again. So I think it's likely to be prejudicially impacting not just people's personal privacy, but people's data privacy, and will ultimately go a long way towards undermining the essence of the judgment of the Supreme Court, apart from prejudicially impacting people's right to privacy. So I believe this particular hurry with which this particular thing has been done, without any prior consultation, surely is an indication that we are all now waiting for stage 2 of the litigation process. Because assuming this is passed by the Parliament, it's likely to be again challenged in the Supreme Court, both under the contempt powers as also intrinsically because of its unconstitutionality as being violative of Article 21 of the Constitution of India. So I think we are looking at one more stage of potential confrontation between the petitioners and the government, who is now hell-bent upon trying to use, misuse, or give access to private entities who in any case have no specific responsibilities for keeping the said data safe or secure. They have no sense of kind of obligations for ensuring the cyber security of such data. So I think as a country, we are beginning to play with fire. And if we are beginning to play with fire, we must be ready for collateral damage to the nation as well. Already 100 million of the Aadhaar numbers or the biometrics of Indians had got compromised. We have n number of cases where more than 50 plus FIRs have been lodged by UIDAI. I don't think we are as a country prepared that we should go for a second stage where the UIDAI or the police should now launch for 500 FIRs rather than 50 FIRs. It's our bounden duty to protect the personal, biometric data and also the privacy as well.
Well, we have Sulaiman Khan of the Congress. Sulaiman Khan, there were members of the Congress party who, like Mr. Tharoor, who challenged this particular amendment. But consider this, let's assume your government was in power. Would you still be against the idea of the parliament being given these powers to decide who can use Aadhaar and who can't?
I think even if we have brought a law on the subject, we would not have, bypassed Rajya Sabha by bringing the bill as a money bill as they have done in 2016 and, bypass the debate in the Rajya Sabha and brought a money bill to bypass the debate. whatever has happened today in the parliament by bringing this Aadhaar and other laws amendment bill 2018, I think there are only 2 points which I want to say. They are actually circumvent and bypassed the judgment of the Supreme Court, and in a way they have undermined the mandate given by the court. So Supreme Court has said that Section 57, which actually give statutory powers to these service providers to seek Aadhaar numbers, has been held to be unconstitutional. And when that has been held to be unconstitutional by the court, now you bring this law and say that now you can voluntarily give your Aadhaar number through authentication or offline verification. And the language which you have, I think, read when Dr. Tharoor was speaking at page number 3, point number 5, it is actually amendment to section 4 of the Principal Act. And there is subsection 4, Faye, I want to read, of section 4, subsection 4 at page number 3, point number 10, line number 10, an entity may be allowed to perform authentication if the authority is satisfied that the requesting entity is compliant with the such standard of privacy and security as may be specified by regulation. So actually, if some entity, a service provider, has to perform authentication, the authority has to get satisfied that it has all the privacy, but the data will be given to that private service provider when it will seek. So my question is, why the government is so hell-bent to provide the personal data of an individual to these
allow Bhaskar
private
Ghosh to
entities,
respond to you.
and when there is no data protection law. So Supreme Court has said that bring a data protection law, then you can bring this law or whatever you want to. But you have not brought this data protection law, but you want this bill to be passed. So it's the intention of the government is not right.
Well, Bhaskar Ghosh, do you want to respond to that? First of all, the intention of the government is not right, is what the Congress party is saying. More importantly, Pawan Dugal, who's a very senior lawyer, has actually, if I may, Pawan Dugal has said that this is an act by the government to circumvent the Supreme Court judgment, and the government has no care right now for the privacy and the needs of the people. Go ahead, Bhaskar Ghosh.
No. I just want to just recollect today, whatever his debate was going to Parliament, and I should mention it, quote unquote, our law minister, that in the Aadhaar ecosystem, every details is not mandatory to give the Aadhaar card in KYC. And the world bodies like World Bank and International Monetary Funds, they have also held from the Aadhaar card or Aadhaar numbers. Now the question is that protecting the data, there is a strong, very stringent provision in the law, in this bill, that any violation of the intruding or invading the personal data is liable for imprisonment, which is extended from 3 years up to 10 years, and there will be a complete protection from the government agencies so that the data is not misused. My question is that every time we present a bill, why we take on the negative side that privacy is challenged, and this, it may not be challenged, because if you see through the Aadhaar bill, entire Aadhaar bill, there are several several provisions are there so that the usage of those misuse of these data should not be done by the private agencies. If they do it, then of course the strong legal provisions.
Mr. Ghosh, do you want to leave things to chance
should be taken against
and faith?
Them. Number two. What is my point, Faye? What is my point? All the data in the Aadhaar card is not necessarily for your KYC. There are same data.
Mr. Ghosh, let me ask you a very straightforward question.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a very straightforward question. According to the last Supreme Court judgment, which was a bench that decided that Aadhaar may only be used in cases where citizens are actually deriving benefits from the Consolidated Fund of India, which means that I as a citizen am deriving some sort of benefit from the government, either a subsidy on my gas cylinder, subsidy on fertilizer, anything of that sort. Other than that, no one is to use Aadhaar. No one, including especially private companies, should be able to use Aadhaar to authenticate or identify a customer. Does the government believe that it should allow private companies to use Aadhaar? That's a yes or no question.
Yeah, that's what I'm telling you. that private companies can use only those information of Aadhaar which is necessary for the KYC, not all the informations.
Mr. Ghosh, let me remind you that the Supreme Court said quite clearly that private companies are not to use Aadhaar. Nikhil Pava, go ahead.
Yeah, Faye, I think what's going to happen here is that the government it's amending the Indian Telegraph Act as well as the laws related to banks to allow banks to demand Aadhaar authentication, so that even though the Supreme Court has disallowed it, because an act of parliament, a new act can be amended to enable mandatory authentication. And then this law is being amended to enable that as well. So it's a circular sort of a process that the government is going through to allow banks and mobile operators to demand Aadhaar. Now, who does this benefit? One, the banks and the mobile operators can more easily open accounts, and that fits into the BJP's plan for JAM, which is Jandhan, Aadhaar and mobile. But secondly, also a large amount of data is collected by the fintech ecosystem. Now, if you look at some of the things that have been said by Nandan Nilekani over the last year or so, he talks about data being used by governments and by fintech entities to enable financial inclusion. So broadly, that's the plan that the government has. This amount of data collection means that citizens have no control over their own data, and it's being taken from them by making it mandatory. You know that old joke about Aadhaar, about it being both voluntary and mandatory? That's what's being played out over here. The bill, the amendment says voluntary everywhere, but in that clause which you had also read out, it's making it mandatory in the process. Let's also, so the primary benefit is going to go to the fintech companies, which can then profile people and build businesses on top of it.
Yes.
That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it should be a choice of the citizens. Our choice is being taken away.
Yes.
Lastly, I just want to point out that this is a government that went to the Supreme Court and argued against a fundamental right to privacy. We should never forget that aspect. We cannot trust this government to protect our privacy.
Well, I'm going to bring Pavan Dugal in here. Pavan Dugal, I'm also reading from a note that K.K. Venugopal...
I just want to make one point. If I'm allowed, I want to make one point.
Just 1 second. The K.K. Venugopal, who's the AGI, in October made a statement where he said that I'm of the opinion that the use of physical Aadhaar card without authentication in order to establish identity is on a purely voluntary basis is not prohibited by the judgment of the Supreme Court. Mr. Dugal, by that argument, it's not technically in contempt, is it?
Well, the government would want to argue that I'm a sovereign government. Independent of what the Supreme Court says, the parliament of the country has the power to pass any law, even in supersession of any judgment of the Supreme Court. And even if such an petition for contempt is going to come in, they're going to say the power of contempt cannot circumvent the power of legislation, which is granted to the legislature. So that's the ultimate card that the government is likely to play. But I think, see the broad ramifications of this approach on the minds of the people. It's not about winning your numbers in the parliament. It's not about overruling Supreme Court. It's not even trying to fight a contempt petition in the Supreme Court. It's about a bigger issue, about confidence. If you are giving that message to the people of the country that we do not care of what the topmost court of the country say, vis-a-vis protecting your privacy, and we will go whole hog in terms of ensuring private entities to access your biometric data and your Aadhaar data without any safeguards, what is the message that's loud and clear? That this particular dispensation does not have the respect of the people's data and is not very serious about trying to give that sanctity to the fundamental right to privacy. Of course, you can play with fire, you can come up with this kind of legislation, and then you can see a Pandora's box opening up of new actions, because now a large number of people are likely to potentially challenge this particular act in various high courts and in the Supreme Court on the ground that it's violating the right to privacy under Article 21 of the Constitution.
Rahul Singh has a point to make. Rahul Singh, go ahead, please.
Hey, can I come in?
So I agree that there are certain procedures of government and certain procedures of the Supreme Court, and conflicts might happen. We have been observing these kind of conflicts, from last 30-35 years. It has been increasing. Larger issue here is not about what is the conflict between government and Supreme Court. Larger issue is citizen going to pay out of the conflicts between government and Supreme Court? As a citizen, I would not like to disclose all my data, and that's what is to be protected either by the Supreme Court or the government or by both the agencies. So if there is a law coming which is securing, it has to secure for sure. If there is a law coming which is securing my data, I'm all right. If there are 30 variables of my data, 10 are public, 20 are secured, I'm all right. But if all 30 are given to private agency, there is a problem. We have seen that happening in a bank account when it is handled by private companies and your transactions are not being done by you but shown in your account. So there is a moral hazard. What we need to check on is moral hazard.
Okay.
Don't stop the process of policy making and law creation.
Rahul Singh, forgive me for interrupting you, but Anupam Saraf disagrees with you, and I want to be able to bring, give him a word before we wrap this up. Anupam Saraf, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think fundamentally we are making a mistake by turning Aadhaar into purely a privacy issue. Privacy is important, but I think before privacy, Aadhaar is an issue about identity and identification. So it's important to recognize that by bringing in Aadhaar, we are taking away the ability to identify ourselves in a zillion different ways. And I think it is my right to be identified in multiple ways, not by a number which is assigned by an agency which has no skin in the game as far as whatever are the benefits that I may get out of this identification or misidentification. UIDAI has no skin in the game as far as anybody's identification or identity is concerned. They couldn't care less whether you were identified by the government correctly or incorrectly. And they couldn't care less, and they do not even know if your subsidy went to you or to somebody else. So I think fundamentally, if we don't address the issue and question of identity, and I think the Supreme Court has actually not yet addressed the issue of identity. And I hope the review petitions which are still pending, they will actually look at the issue that they have not yet addressed in the judgment. Yes. And that primary is the issue of identity. Privacy comes much later. Privacy comes if my data is going out. But Aadhaar was not created to protect data. Aadhaar was created in order to enable identity. But the identity is required by the ration shop, it's required by the RTO, it's required by the income tax. If they cannot determine the identity and it's outsourced,
yes,
it is a very strange thing to do. Would you outsource recognizing people instead of recognizing them yourself? Would you ask your secretary or somebody else to say, who is the person who has come to see me, instead of actually identifying that person yourself?
All right, Anupam Saraf, unfortunately, we have run out of time, but what we can conclusively say today is that the Aadhaar debate is not over. It's back again. Just last year, the Supreme Court gave us a judgment where it said very clearly that private companies are not to use Aadhaar to verify their customers. Private companies are not to store data for the Aadhaar verification process. It does seem like the government has moved an amendment now in Lok Sabha that might allow Parliament the ability to bring in a law that will allow private companies access to Aadhaar again. For example, if the interpretation of this amendment is right, it could mean that Parliament could decide tomorrow that you have to have submitted your Aadhaar in order to have a SIM card. If that's the case, from what we understand, all of the petitioners who hard fought that battle in Supreme Court are going to go back to Supreme Court and ask the court to re-look at what is going on. The conversation is not over. We're going to continue to keep a very close eye on Aadhaar for you, because we do believe that this is one of the few issues in this country right now that affects every single Indian. And so it deserves prime time. Thanks for watching.